My name is Rick Jacobs. I am the Congressman's Chief of Staff, and I'm up here to do two things. The first is the flight attendant speech. So everyone find where your nearest exits are. There is flotation under your seat should you have a water landing. The second thing I'm up here for is something, unfortunately, I wish I never would have had to do, but only in the last few years, the 10 years, have I had to get up and give the Let's All Be Civil speech. So this is the Let's All Be Civil speech. This is an incredible opportunity for us to have a community conversation about what's going on in our community, in our state, in our world. It's an incredibly challenging time, and there are a lot of people in this room with some very strong opinions and some very pointed questions, and that's fine. We're here to have that conversation. We just ask that everyone be respectful of one another, that people ask a question, not make a 5-minute speech, and that you provide the space and the opportunity for others to feel comfortable enough to share their thoughts and opinions and questions. And I suspect if we can all agree to that, we will have a productive civil evening. So thank you all for being here very much. And without further ado, Congressman Seth Moulton.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. Let me start with the two most important words this evening, which are thank you. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for participating in our democracy. Look, this is a time when a lot of people are frustrated. Things are so polarized, they just want to check out. And I think it's actually a very important time for us to be involved and to have this kind of conversation. And ultimately, because I work for you, I can't do that very well if we don't have this conversation. So thank you for being here. Now, I know a lot of people have a lot of concerns, and so I'll make my introduction brief so that we can get to your questions. But just to get one concern out of the way, how many of you are concerned that by your presence here this evening, you're going to miss the next episode of the Karen Reed trial? Well, if it makes you feel any better, the Sox made a great trade. So, anyway, I do want to have a quick word on what Rick said, which is that I pride myself in this community in being able to have difficult discussions about things where we may even disagree without being disagreeable. And I hope we can live up to that democratic tradition tonight, small d democratic, that's so important to our community, to our country, and to fundamentally our way of governance and our way of life. Let me start with just a few highlights of the work that I'm doing, just to kind of seed the conversation. And I'm just going to mention 4 things briefly. The first is the so-called Big Beautiful Bill. So that you all know, I voted against it. And the reason I did is because I don't think it serves you very well. I think that taking health care away from about 10 million Americans. I think that increasing the debt by about $4 to $5 trillion, with no plan to pay for that, so we just pass that to our kids or our grandkids, all in the name of giving tax cuts that disproportionately benefit the wealthy, is just not a good trade-off. It doesn't mean that there's nothing good in the bill. It doesn't mean that there might be something in there that you might agree with. But I don't think it's the right trade-off to this community. There is a caveat. Are there any billionaires here tonight? Okay, I was going to say, there are. It serves you quite well. There's nothing wrong with billionaires. I'd love to be one myself. But it's not the trade-off that I think we need for this community. So that's the one real substantive piece of legislation that we voted on recently, and I want to be upfront about where I stand. The second thing you just mentioned is that while everyone is focused on all these issues domestically, while there's so much going on right here at home and in Washington that affects our lives every day, there's also a whole other world out there that's pretty dangerous. And from my position in Congress, I'm sitting on the China Committee, the Armed Services Committee, I haven't lost focus on what's going on there as well. And I recently returned from a trip to the Western Pacific, including the Philippines and Vietnam and Japan. three of our most important allies that we need to keep on our side to deter China from starting a war over Taiwan, a war that we could get enveloped in that could literally be World War III. That's the biggest national security concern of our entire country. That's really the biggest national security threat in the entire world today. And we can't lose focus on those things, and I am not. You know, we went to Hanoi, for example, where the Vietnamese are, you might be surprised to hear after our history there in the last 60 years, remarkably on our side, very opposed to China, but trying to figure out why in exchange for, you know, offering to stand with us against the big bully in the neighborhood, we've said to them, hey, we're going to tariff you by 50%. That doesn't really make sense. We've also cut a lot of funding for programs that are not only good for Vietnam, like USAID programs, CDC programs that save a lot of Vietnamese children's lives every day with vaccines, but they're also really important for us because it turns out a lot of novel viruses come from Asia. Have you ever heard of that before? And we used to detect them in Vietnam. And it would help us be prepared should they come to our shores, and those funds have all been cut. Who's filling this void? China. China's moving right in. And I'm not sure that's a wise investment in our future. But these are the discussions that we're having as well. Third thing I want to just mention is I had the opportunity to ask some questions of our Secretary of Defense over the past couple of weeks. If you haven't seen that exchange, I invite you to check it out because part of our job in Congress is to hold the executive accountable. And it's frustrating for a lot of people that Congress is not doing a very good job of that overall. But I'd like to think I did the best job I could with Secretary Seth, and we're going to keep doing that kind of work every opportunity we have. So I invite you to check that out on social media or YouTube or whatever, where you can pull that up if you haven't already. And finally, the fourth issue I just want to mention, another place where we need more accountability is with immigration. I know there are a lot of concerns about immigration, and we've gone from a lot of very serious concerns last year about what was going on at the southern border and all the immigrants coming into our communities unchecked, without a plan to secure the border, not a plan to deal with them up here, even in Massachusetts, very far from the southern border. And now that's all shifted to an administration that's sort of rounding people up so indiscriminately that an 18-year-old honor student, volleyball star, headed to college, just got rounded up and told by ICE that you're being detained because you overstayed a visa. And he said, when did I do that? Well, when you were 6 years old. I mean, there's a limit here to just, you know, the absurdity. There's a basic common sense test that doesn't meet, and that's why I was proud to fight to get him out of detention. But for every story we know, there's probably 10 stories we don't know. And so that's another place where we need to keep holding the administration accountable. Because we understand that there are laws out there that need to be enforced. But when the system is so fundamentally broken that you're rolling up 18-year-olds, then we need to make sure that we're upholding these laws in the right way. So with that brief introduction, let me turn it over to you. My team is kind of stationed throughout the room here, and they have the microphone. So try to make eye contact with them if you want to ask a question. We'll get to as many as we can this evening. Thanks again.
Hello, my name is Joanna Green. I'm a junior at this high school, Tewksbury Memorial High School. I'm going into my senior year. And good evening, Tewksbury residents and Congressman Seth Moulton. I know you were an ex-Marine, so you understand what a military career entails. And just a week ago, I returned home from Military Academy West Point. I attended the summer leadership experience, and there I learned just what it means to be in the military and have a military career and what the student life looks like at a military academy. And it's no small feat. All it made me want to do was join the military even more and pursue my dream and passions at West Point or the Naval Academy or the Everest Academy. And so I ask you, what was your inspiration in joining the military, and not just the military but the Marines? And how did that pivot into a political career?
Well, sure. Thank you very much for your question, and thank you for being a student who's willing to come here and ask a question tonight, because I don't think there are enough young people involved in politics. I don't think there are enough young people in Congress. You check the average age; it's pretty old. And so I really appreciate you asking that question. And thank you for being willing to serve the country. Now, a lot of people, let me just kind of anticipate a question that many of you might have swirling in your mind. A lot of people ask me, a lot of young people your age, should I serve the country right now? You know, I've always wanted to serve the country like you, but should I serve under this commander-in-chief? And I'm not putting that question in your mouth, but I have heard that from a lot of young people. And actually, I think this is a very important time to serve the country. This is a time when I didn't hear you say you want to sign up to go to the streets of LA and stand off against fellow Americans. That means that if you're put in that position, you might actually have to disobey a lawful order. And it takes smart, thoughtful, courageous people to be willing to do that if that's ever the case. So this is a time when we need good people to be still willing to serve, and so I'm glad that you are. For me, it was a bit of a different time, but it was actually before the wars of Iraq and Afghanistan that I made the decision to serve. And I was really inspired by the most important mentor I've ever had in my life, who was actually a minister at my college. He was sort of a man larger than life. It was a moral center for the university. I wasn't the most religious guy, but I listened to his lessons and his moral teachings. He said that, you know, you've got a great opportunity here going to Harvard. You ought to do something to give back. And when I looked at different options, I just had so much respect for the 18-year-old kids who served on our front lines that I decided that's where I would do my part. Now, I didn't know that there would be a war would start 3 months after my graduation. I didn't know I'd end up doing 4 tours in Iraq. But over the course of that time in the war, a war that I often disagreed with and was not afraid to criticize, I felt like I saw some of the real consequences of failed leadership in Washington. Decisions made in D.C. that didn't reflect what was going on with us on the ground, because people were so out of touch. And that, at the end of the day, is why I decided to do this job after getting out. It wasn't what I expected to do. It wasn't what I even planned to do right after I got out. In fact, the first job I took after grad school was in Dallas. I don't know if any of you have taken Politics 101, but you don't move to Dallas if you're planning to run for Congress in Massachusetts. So this was not really on my dance card. But I ultimately decided to do it because I think that we need more veterans in Congress and more people who can speak to what happened on the ground in Iraq. And in the words of a corporal in my platoon, who once said, you know, sir, you ought to go to Congress so that this stuff doesn't happen again. He used the Marine term for stuff, but I didn't want to offend your West Point sensibilities, so we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, Mr. Moulton. My name is Trevor.
Good evening.
I'm one of your constituents from North Andover.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say thank you for your service. It's very much appreciated. Also, shout out to anyone who went to the No Kings protest this weekend.
Yes. Yes, thank you.
So, I recognize I am one of the younger people in this room. No offense to anyone. But I have been noticing a concerning amount of rise in authoritarianism throughout my entire lifetime. I was born in 2000. Not even a year later, we were in Afghanistan, and then the Patriot Act, and then Iraq, and now a lot of other stuff's going on, I'm sure everybody knows. I feel like there's a lot of overlap between what we're seeing in our government now and also what we're seeing overseas, especially with the what I will call the genocide in Gaza. And I am very concerned about the now hot war that's going on between Israel and Iran. And I want to know what is your plan to kind of tackle the issue that's at hand, and how are we supposed to get ourselves out of this mess without honestly sanctioning Israel and cutting off their arms, because ultimately they are our weapons, our tax dollars, and they're going to, ultimately they are killing children and women and a lot of people that don't deserve this kind of violence against them for actions that they didn't commit.
Thank you very much for the question. There's a lot in there, so let me try to parse it out. You mentioned you were born in 2000, so a year before September 11th, and the wars that followed, and some of the policies that followed as well, like the Patriot Act, that a lot of people, for various reasons on both sides of the aisle, have both agreed with and disagreed with. Mike, yeah. I think that one of the things that responsible people have been trying to do over the last 25 years is strike the correct balance between freedom and security. And some people think the Patriot Act goes too far in the security direction at the expense of freedom. Other people disagree. But there is a very legitimate debate that should be had and plays out in Congress and has for the last, honestly, the last 25 years, especially every time that bill comes up for renewal, about what exactly those trade-offs are. But that is different than authoritarianism. And while we can have that legitimate debate about freedom versus security, to me that's never an excuse for authoritarianism. And what most concerns me about what we've seen, especially over the last 6 months, is a real rise in authoritarianism from our own government, where dissent is not allowed, where you can be rolled up just for violating the First Amendment to the Constitution, which is freedom of speech, where you don't even know why you're being detained or who the people are detaining you, because they show up in masks and unclear uniforms and take you off the street as if it's North Korea or Iran. And that's something that I am speaking out strongly against, doing what I can from the minority in Congress to stop. And I think we all need to stand up for that, which is exactly why I was at a couple of No Kings protests this weekend myself. That's the whole point, is we don't have kings, we don't have authoritarians or dictators here in America, and I think we're sliding dangerously in that direction. But I do think there's a distinction there between the legitimate debate that we can have, and we can have good disagreement and find the right balance, freedom versus security. They're not always opposed, but sometimes we have to balance one for the other. Authoritarianism, however, has no place. And the first people who came from Europe, from England to Massachusetts, where we stand today, were doing it to escape a king. So we should know this. It should be in our DNA as a country. Now, with regards to what's going on in Iran right now, and it's developing every hour. Look, a few just first principles. Israel has the right to exist. It has the right to defend itself. And I am totally opposed to Iran having a nuclear weapon, especially when Iran has written in its charter the destruction of Israel and death to America. But how we go about getting there really matters. It matters not just in terms of the moral questions that you raised, but also just in terms of our national security goals. We could eliminate a nuclear weapon in Iran today, but if they're able to rebuild it and be back right where we started a year from now, then that doesn't solve the problem. So we have to have we have to really understand what the strategy is here, and it's why I've always supported a diplomatic approach. I was a strong supporter of the Iran nuclear deal. And by the way, if we had that in place, if Trump had not thrown it out, Iran today would be at least a year away from a nuclear weapon, not the few days that Israel reports or whatnot. And so that, to me, would have been a much better route to pursue. But in terms of the current conflict, I have very serious concerns, even though I also want to see Iran get rid of a nuclear weapon. I do think it's important to stand by our allies, and Israel is an ally. But how they go about this war and whether it's effective, those are questions that I'm going to continue asking. And I'll tell you, when we had the CENTCOM commander, the top U.S. military official for the region, in before the Armed Services Committee on Tuesday of last week, a week ago from tomorrow, I asked him these very questions, not knowing that Israel was going to conduct an attack, but knowing that it was being talked about. And I will just say that, some of the answers I heard were concerning, and that's why I'm going to continue to ask these questions. No matter what happens, civilians don't deserve to die. And you're absolutely right about that. That's why I recently joined a piece of legislation calling for Netanyahu to change his strategy and approach to humanitarian aid in Gaza. It's why I repeatedly call on Netanyahu to have an end game that's a political solution to what's going on in Gaza, not just a military answer, because that's clearly not working to end the crisis. And it's why I've always said that we shouldn't be killing innocent civilians on either side. October 7th was a heinous attack. It should never have happened, but innocent Palestinian kids don't deserve to die either. So thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Moulton, for holding this tonight. I will hear with this gentleman's request and with you voting against the big, beautiful bill. But my questions to you tonight are two, and they are deeply personal. What do you say to our 16-year-old grandson who we're raising, who is half Hispanic, given that ICE on Friday went to a car repair shop and picked up a man who was holding his passport, his U.S. passport, and detained him, and whose attorney has not yet been allowed to speak with that man? So my first question to you, Congressman Moulton, is what forms of identification will protect my child born in the U.S. to 2 U.S. citizens from being detained by ICE because he is half Hispanic? My second question to you is, what if he is detained? What do we do then? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming here and sharing, as you say, those two very personal questions. And it is embarrassing to me as a federal official that we even have to hear questions like that in the United States of America. Shouldn't have to ask those questions, because that should never be happening. And I don't know that there's anyone in the room who disagrees with that, but I'm certainly with you. And I would be gravely concerned myself. And there are a lot of things I'm worried about with my kids to begin with, and yet I don't have to worry about that. So I hear your concern, and I'm sure your son is every bit as concerned as you. I'll say a couple things. First of all, the honest truth is that we can't trust ICE with what they've been doing. Therefore, I could try to make you feel better, but I'd be lying if I were to say that, hey, everything's going to be fine, because it's been fine so far. As I said at the very beginning, an 18-year-old got rolled up because they said he violated a visa when he was 6 years old. He was eventually released, but he spent 6 days in a detention facility where no one is supposed to stay overnight, never had a shower, slept on a concrete floor, and obviously that should never have happened. The second thing I'll say is that I do think there are practical things you can do. Make sure your son does have his identification on him. Make sure that you're aware of if you see law enforcement in the area, that you stand by him. But also, the state, through Attorney General Andrea Campbell, has put out some really smart guidance about exactly what the legal rules are. I'll tell you, I had to get this guidance and review it just because, as a member of Congress, they could threaten to search my phone when I'm coming in through immigration, even though they're not allowed to do that. And so I had to learn, because of the day that we live in today, exactly what I need to say to a CPB official if he tries to search my phone. But that's the education that we all have to have today. And it's sad to say that, but that's the truth. If he does get caught up by ICE, the first thing we should do is call my office. And we will do everything we can to get him out as quickly as possible. And although I'm confident that we'll succeed, as we've succeeded with several other cases in recent history, but also in the first Trump administration, none of us ever want to be in that position. But that's what we're here for. My office is here to help you with federal officials when they don't do their job. So just like if you're a veteran who's not getting the care or the benefits that he or she is owed from the VA, call my office. If you're not getting your check from the Social Security Administration, call my office. We'll do everything we can to help. And amazingly, in America today, if your son gets taken by ICE, then call my office, and we'll do everything to help. We are proud of having good constituent services. We actually won an award not too long ago for the best constituent services in the entire country, anywhere in the House or Senate. We're very proud of that track record, and we work very hard to serve people, often on the worst days of their lives. So we'll continue doing that because I work for you. Well,
I'm over here.
Thanks for coming. I'm representing. I'm a citizen in the town. I just have to question what you were saying about the military being safe to join. With things like loyalty oaths to a felon being required, with things like oligarchs being entered at the rank of lieutenant colonel, with talks of false flag attack from Israel to get us to attack Iran. Is it really that safe to join the military? And what paths are we providing to those in the military to be able to stand up against illegal orders? How are we allowing them to be protected?
To be clear, it's never safe to join the military. That's the point. You're willing to risk your life for the country. And right now, you might not only be risking your life, you might be risking your career or your reputation, because you could very well find yourself in a position where you have to disobey a lawful order, an unlawful order, rather. But that's, again, I think why it's important. So, I'm not on a recruiting drive, but when people come up to me and say, should I serve or should I not, my personal perspective on it is if you're a good person, if you're a good American, actually it's a really important time to serve. So that this commander-in-chief doesn't run rampant, trampling our laws and, frankly, trampling our military in the process. I'm heartened to hear, indirectly, though I haven't spoken directly to any officers asked to deploy to Los Angeles, that there are a lot of Marine officers right now who are considering resigning their commissions. Because they say, if we get asked to do what these guys are being sent to do in LA, I just can't do that. Can't do that on my conscience. And I can guarantee you that nobody signed up for the United States Marines to go to Los Angeles and fight protesters. That's not what we're trained to do, that's not what we sign up to do, and in my view, it's unconstitutional. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman.
Oh, yes, sir.
My name is Mike DeWitt. I have a simple question. What legal basis does the president have to withdraw funds from programs that were previously authorized by Congress?
That's a great question, Mike. And I don't think he has any legal basis to do that. But the problem is he's getting away with it because we have a person in charge of the House of Representatives who I think will go down as the weakest speaker in American history because he's just not willing to stand up. And I imagine it's incredibly frustrating to you. It's also really frustrating for me, frankly, to be serving in a body that's supposed to be doing this job. The job I signed up to do was this oversight, right? And that's the job under the Constitution. That's the whole point of the checks and balances we have in our constitutional government. And yet, because the majority controls what we do in Congress, the House and the Senate are not doing this job and not holding the executive responsible. I had a conversation with a Republican who came up to me on Friday, just when we were leaving Washington last week, and said that, when you allow a United States senator to get thrown to the ground and handcuffed because he asked a question, that weakens all of us. Americans, Congress, our Constitution, and our government. And regardless of what party he happens to be from, we should all, as members of Congress, stand up and stand together to say, that is not acceptable. The executive can't get away with trampling Article 1 of the Constitution. But Johnson's unwilling to do that. And it brings me back to something I realized, I think, rather early in my time in Congress. which is that while a lot of people are frustrated with Congress, and a lot of people say to me, Seth, how can Congress be so stupid? You know, how does Congress not believe in climate change or vaccines or whatever the thing is at the moment, right? My observation is that actually most of my colleagues are pretty smart. I mean, there are a few exceptions. There's a woman in Georgia, I don't know if you've heard, but most of them are pretty smart. What's lacking in Congress isn't intelligence, it's courage. It's just the willingness to tell the truth, to vote correctly when you're so scared of the political consequences back home from the commander-in-chief or whoever it is. And, you know, the definition of political courage, every example in Profiles in Courage in that book that I think more Americans should read again is of, in that case, a senator standing up to his own party. And that's what the Republicans are unwilling to do right now. That's real political courage. And I spend a lot of time trying to encourage my Republican colleagues to do that because it's not good enough for us Democrats to just do it on our own. That's why I have conversations like I had with my colleague on Friday. But it's been pretty hard. You know, Don Bacon is like, we should cite him as the one example of a Republican with real political courage, and I've worked with him on a lot of things, and I talk to him quite regularly. But right now he seems to be the only go-to person out of several hundred in Congress on the Republican side. Thank you for your question.
Hi, my name is Sue Stapleton, and thank you very much, Congressman Moulton, for coming here. I've been waiting for you to come, so thank you. There's many, many, many things that I'm concerned about. Social Security, Medicare, you know, tons of things. I could speak all day. But the one thing that is really concerning me is the folks like Curtis Yarvin, the Peter Thiels, the ones that are out there trying to take down our democracy. There are articles out there, you know, that J.D. Vance is, you know, quoted in these articles that he is, you know, looking, you know, that's the kind of philosophy that even J.D. Vance believes in. And I'm concerned that they're just going to keep building and building and building their base. And I just want to make sure that our Democratic Party is really paying attention to people like the Curtis Yarvins and the Peter Thiels and, you know, the plant, is it Plantar? That Pelletier, yes, that is now, you know, he's also part of it and he's taking our data and that's scary. That's really scary. So I just wanted to hopefully, you know, bring that up and hopefully that, you know, see that we're paying attention to that.
Sue, thank you very much for the question. I'm very glad to be here with you tonight. It's a great question. And I'm really glad you asked it. The very simple answer is I share your concerns. I don't think these are wild concerns. Some people would say, oh, there are a lot of conspiracy theories there. I think these are very legitimate questions. We have privacy rules for a reason. We have a government that's not supposed to control all of your data for a reason. And those rules seem to be being grossly violated. Now, there are court cases that aim to address this. The problem with the third branch of government, the judiciary, is that it moves slowly. And it's designed that way. It's designed to be slow and considerate so it reaches the right conclusion at the end of the day. But by the end of the day, they probably already have your data. And so we may have to figure out ways to claw it back if it comes to that. I think these are especially pressing concerns when you consider the rise of AI. And AI is going to do amazing things. It's going to accelerate cures for cancer, but it also has the potential to end life on Earth. We need to make sure that that doesn't happen. And having AI control all of our data, I think, is a frightening prospect. And people who are just totally comfortable with that, I don't think really get it. You asked if Democrats are doing enough to push back on this. Look, I'm proud to be a Democrat, but I don't think we're doing enough, candidly. And I think that there's two things fundamentally that Democrats need to be doing right now. One is standing up vociferously to this stuff going on. And I try to do that every day. There's some strategy in picking your battles and not saying no to every single thing all at once. But I don't mince words. When Vance and Trump met Zelensky in the Oval Office in what I think was one of the most embarrassing meetings in American history, I said what I thought. Trump's a puppet of Putin, and I wasn't afraid to say that. And there are a lot of times like that when Democrats just need to speak the truth, not try to always, say things exactly right, but really speak the truth about what's going on. The second thing that I think Democrats need to do is actually start winning elections, because we're not going to fix this without restoring some balance to Washington. And so I'm very focused on that as well. This isn't a political event, so I'm not going to get into all the details. But I'll tell you, I think our party needs some reform to recognize that we've lost touch with a lot of Americans, and that's why we're losing. And there are huge consequences to losing, including protecting some of the most vulnerable people in our society that only Democrats will stand up for. So let's start winning elections. Let's expand our majority. Let's bring more people in, because that's, folks, how you win elections. And that sort of battle is happening in the party. And there's a small group of us, I call the reformers, who are actually trying to have this conversation so we put ourselves in a better position rather than just sort of go along for the ride. I'm doing that as well. But thank you, Sue, for your question.
We're going to stay right here.
Okay.
Good evening, Congressman Moulton. My name is Mari, and I'm 15, and I'm finishing up my 9th grade year.
Awesome.
And I'm worried about my future under this administration in Washington because I'm going to need scholarships and financial aid and student loan to be able to go to college and graduate school. However, under the leadership of WWE promoter Linda McMahon, the Department of Education is being destroyed. So what can students like me expect from the state and federal governments in terms of accessing higher education? And what specifically are you doing to fight the assault on public education?
Great question, and thank you so much for asking it just as are you graduating from 9th grade or you're going into 9th grade? Well, congratulations on that. In what, a few days coming up? 2 days, a couple days. I wish I could tell you not to worry, that these are legitimate concerns. So I'm glad you asked the question. And I say this as someone who wouldn't have been able to go to college without financial aid, who wouldn't have been able to go to grad school without the GI Bill. These are really important questions for students to ask. I'm still paying off one of my loans from grad school, so I get that this really matters. And I love the fact that you pointed out that the Secretary of Education is the WWE, promoter or CEO or whatever. Well said. That's a well-asked question. The only difference is that now she's destroying the Department of Education, and it's not faked. So these are real serious concerns. And we don't actually know, first of all, exactly how far this is going to go. Many of the promised cuts to the Department of Education haven't actually happened yet. And so some people wonder if they're going to happen because Elon Musk has been kicked out and Doge is sort of a shadow of itself, or whether it's still going to come through. But either way, you can count on Democrats to fight these cuts, to fight for education funding, and to fight for it to be federal. Because we're fortunate to live in a state that while our schools are not perfect, and they need to get that, we had a great discussion with your town officials, by the way, just before this town hall, about innovations in education and how we meet the needs of today's students in a school system that was really designed 50 or 100 years ago. And I'm glad to report that you have some local officials who were very thoughtful about these questions, and we had a great discussion. I wish you could have been there. But we don't know exactly where this is headed with the Department of Education. But I will tell you that there's an important role for the federal government to play. Because you might feel fortunate to be in Massachusetts with the best schools in the country, but what if you've been born in Mississippi? You deserve an education as well. You deserve a high quality education. And I don't think there's any better investment that we can make. Of all the different things the US government can invest in, I cannot imagine a better investment with a higher return than investing in education for our kids. You are literally the future of America. And so we've got to make sure that those investments stand. I'll say one other thing, though. I do think that this is a time of rapid change in society, technology, in the world. And I think it would be a mistake for Democrats to come back into power 2 years from now, 4 years from now, and just simply say, hey, we're going to rebuild the Department of Education brick by brick exactly the way it was. Democrats, I think, when we do get back power, should take the opportunity to say, no, we're going to make changes, but we're going to look forward. We're not going to try to bring the country back to some imagined past in the 1950s when, Trump seems to think that everything was great. But we are also not going to stand still. And we're not going to just be the status quo. We are going to help figure out how you take on the challenges of AI. Because that's going to displace a lot of careers. If you wanted to be a paralegal, I'm not sure that's going to work out because AI might take your job. We want to prepare the American workforce for that future. We want to make sure that kids have more vocational opportunities because robots are probably not going to replace plumbers or electricians anytime soon, and that's why you see lines outside of vocational schools today. And we're going to make sure that if you want to go to college, you can actually afford to do so. And the colleges are using the money responsibly, but you're also in a position to be able to pay back those loans if you take them to go. These are questions that we haven't fixed now, and so the opportunity we have going forward is not just to patch up the system that we have, but to make it much better to serve the future, kids like you, for many years to come. Thank you.
This is going to be our last question.
Wow, this goes fast.
John Ash.
What do you really serve, Seth Moulton? Israel or the United States? You took $42,000 from AIPAC so that Israel can kill Palestinian children. And this man next to me just said that he doesn't want to sit next to my friend Fawaz because he's Palestinian. Do you excuse that racism? Who do you serve? You're a coward. You're a coward. And I don't care that you're a veteran. I don't care. You can look at me with that smirk on your face all you want. It doesn't make a difference. Who do you serve? Who do you serve? Do you serve the American people or do you serve Israel? No war with Iran. I'm leaving. No war with Iran. No slaughter. No genocide of Palestinian children like my friend Hadid. Her children do not deserve to die. They don't ever been as valuable as your grandchildren, sir, and you should be ashamed of your disgusting racism.
Well, folks, we almost made it. Up until the last question. I've really enjoyed the discussion so far, and we'll see if we can get back on track with the last question. Yes, sir.
First off, I'm fortunate to have my family here in Tewksbury, as you said about the education. We've been surprised by that. I have a first grader whose best friend was affected by the deportation. And I think my question is what's the best way for them to have agency, for them to have impact in speaking up about these things outside of bringing them along to protest?
As a fellow dad, thank you for your question. And I'm proud to serve you as a congressman. I was proud to be a United States Marine. But my most important job is a dad, and I think about these questions all the time. And they're really tough to answer. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure I know the right answer because I haven't figured out for my own kids. And I feel fortunate that my 4-year-old and my 6-year-old haven't asked the questions that you're probably getting right now.
Have dads to me. You are the criminal. You are the criminal. He is not. You decided to. This is why we have the problem.
So I think it's a very difficult time to just have kids in America. I don't know that I can tell you how to, be the best dad in that sense. There's a degree to which I try to insulate my kids, and I feel, glad that they don't fully understand what's going on. I feel lucky that my girls are totally unimpressed when I'm on TV. My 6-year-old says, "Oh yes, Dad just talks about this congressional stuff and it's really boring." But I will tell you that my 4-year-old followed up that statement by saying, "Yeah, he talks about Trump a lot." And I thought, Jesus, how do you even know who that is? But that's the reality. That's the world that we live in. So I'm not going to stand here and tell you how to do to be a dad, but I am going to tell you that I feel the same pain, the same frustration, and I'm trying to figure out myself, because we have to navigate this world for our kids. And
I guess
that's the most, sorry, go ahead.
letters, things like that, what, with classmates?
Oh, I see, so, yeah, that's a very good point. Sort of, what is the outlet? Look, kids can come to protests. My wife asked if she wanted me to bring the girls tonight to the town hall. I said no, that's looking like a good decision. Might have been sitting right here in the front row. But I do think that people forget, with all the frustration with our government and with the administration and everything, that there is a lot that we can do in our community just to push back about the things that are happening, right? If you're an attorney and you're able to do immigration law, volunteer, because there are a lot of immigrants who need attorneys right now. If you're someone, one of the unseen cuts from DOGE is that there's been a lot of USDA funding that went to our food banks. By the way, a lot of it also goes to local farms. The local farmers are hurting, but they're also not getting their food bought by food banks because they've lost the funding, and so a lot more people are hungry. So volunteering at food banks, volunteering to do can drives at your school, that's a way for people to give back. I was very glad that my kids did that recently. They just went to a food pantry and they learned about hunger in the community and came back and said, Dad, did you know that there are people who don't have enough food every night? And that's a really important lesson for kids to learn, but it's also a way they can feel like they can help out. So I think that's something a lot of people say, Seth, what can I do, right? And how can I, go to the No Kings protests. Yes, those are great. Show up at town halls, ask questions of your elected officials. But don't forget also the important ways that we can all volunteer in our communities every day. Because there are a lot of people who are just hurting, and they don't know where to turn for help. And when you show up at a food bank or a soup kitchen, or you show up at an immigration rights center and you help people with the skills that you have, you're not only helping people in need, you're showing that our community cares. That's really important. That sends a message not only to the people in our community who are scared, like your son, it also sends a message to Washington that we're better than this, folks. That we're better than this. This administration does not represent American values. And that we can stand up for what has always made America great every single day. And I do think that you are doing that by coming here tonight. I am sure that you did not all agree with everything I said. We have a crazy cult if you all just agree with my every word. That's not what we're after here. This is a democracy where we can have disagreements, where we can have debates. When I can hear from you and listen to your concerns so that I can better do my job in Washington. And with everyone who's here right now, that's exactly what we've done. So thank you very much for coming out tonight. And we work for you, so let us know how we can help. Have a good evening.